In my thesis work, I've deepened the role of the interpreter and especially some aspects that interest him, such as proxemics and kinesics. For centuries now, we have witnessed a continuous evolution of man, of cultures, of ways of thinking, and therefore of dialoguing. The different ethnic group and consequently the birth of various languages has allowed intercultural communication between individuals from two different worlds. The study of intercultural communication has its origins in the United States in the 70s, when the student protest of 68, the awareness of minority and the students' experience made it develop as a science. Intercultural communication, defined as ethno-communication, presupposes a knowledge of a culture and is studied through means, structure, and context. My study had the aim of analyzing intercultural communication with the consequent evaluation of problems, variables that may arise during a dialogue with a person of another nationality. I then decided to analyze the figure of the interpreter being the key figure so that the exchange of information between two or more different cultures could take place, examining his role with historical hints and focusing on the importance of memory that characterizes the professional figure. The role of the interpreter is fundamental, being a language and communications expert who listens, understands, and translates orally from one language to another during events, conferences, TV shows. The help of this figure has always provided indispensable to enable people to communicate. So I wanted to explore the evolution of these professions with historical hints. An interesting case I discovered while working on my thesis was that of Kaiser, who had to interpret in English, French, and German the first homeopathic medicine congress, which lasted a whole week. At the end of the week, he fainted on the last day of the congress. Another fundamental element that I had the pleasure to analyze and deepen was memory. Memory is not a static element, but is always at work, because it is what connects the past with the present and plans the future. Its development took place in parallel with our cognitive function, and this allowed the human being to adapt the surrounding environment. At the same time, as we well know, it's not possible to remember everything, and certain moments can be retrieved during a phase called reconstruction, which take place when we find case traces. The main themes were proxemic and kinesics, which I discovered with great interest. When dialoguing with others, it is fundamental to be able to understand which is the right distance to respect. This must also be evaluated correctly when we find ourselves interpreting someone. Knowledge of proxemic is as important as the word, because in this way it is possible to educate oneself to stay in one's place. If you want communication to be effective, you need to pay attention to the non-verbal signal that the interlocutor sends out, signal of estrangement to approach, and place yourself at relational distance that the other wants to be maintained. After the proxemics, I deepened the kinesics, the study of non-verbal communications, and above all, that which is carried out through movement, gesture, positions, body mimicry in a voluntary or involuntary way. It makes particular reference to anthropological, cultural, and artificial communicative codes, such as gesture of courtesy or contempt, gestures in the various theatrical traditions, oratory gestures, mime, the mute gestural language of cloister monks, deaf mute monks, gypsies, etc. I would like to underline, therefore, the importance that the interpreter assumes in today's world. His professional figure allowed the so-called intercultural communication. The aim of this paper was to highlight the change and adaptation toward a multi-ethnic in which the role of languages and verbal communication is becoming more and more significant day by day. Another event that aroused great interest in me was the case of Donald Trump's interpreter. The interpreter's face did not go unnoticed during the meeting in Washington between the American President Donald Trump and President of the Italian Republic Sergio Mattarella. The perplexed, at times dramatic look as he took notes on the notebook went viral on social media, where after being shared by the Twitter account, it got over 30,000 likes and 1.5 million views. It was inevitable to include Israel's maximally discriminative facial movement coding system MAX, a method of coding facial behavior, and the facial action coding system, specially built for the coding of all facial movements observable on the face of adult subjects. I'd like to conclude by saying that with this paper I have particularly loved to study in depth all that concerns gesture, which is a very important aspect both in the workplace and in everyday life. It is precisely the way we move, gesture, or our facial mimicry that communicates even before words.